Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Write or Die Show. I'm your host, Randi-lee. On the show, we interview other writers and we talk about mental health from their personal journeys. If you have not already hit that like and subscribe button, go ahead, do that now so that you never miss an episode. So, how is everyone on this wonderful, wonderful Wednesday morning? I guess some people it might not be Wednesday morning. So, whatever time it is for you. Today with us, though, we have, of course, another amazing guest. So let's welcome Alexandra Beaumont to the stage. Hello.
Hello, nice to be here. And it is, in fact, Wednesday afternoon for me.
There you go. There you go. And so I know where you're visiting from, but tell everybody where you're visiting from.
So I live in the UK. I live in a lovely little countryside village, which means basically we have a pub and a shop and countryside, and that seems pretty great.
I think I would be okay with that, actually.
It's all you need.
Yeah. That and a horse.
Don't have one of those.
Oh, come on. I keep telling my husband, if we ever move to the country, I just want a horse. That's all. Well, two horses, so they're not lonely.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Sadly, although, I don't have room for a horse, sadly, but maybe a goat one day.
Oh, there you go. Can't ride a goat, but that's okay.
Yeah.
So other than the fact that you live in a cute little countryside town, tell us a little bit more about who Alex is.
Yeah, so I am a fantasy author with a very big interest in folklore and sort of the nature side of folklore, particularly. What else is there to tell about me? I am a trained cellist. I grew up playing a lot of music. I'm an all-round quite sort of creative person, and I love being outdoors. So that's a big thing for me, is sort of playing music, singing, being outdoors, probably annoying people by singing outdoors. One of those things. And
I'm
gardening
one of those
as well.
people. Gardening. Yes, my garden this year has expanded and it is amazing and I love it. So we moved into this house 10 years ago now. When we first moved it, because our backyard is very big for where we live, like it's massive. And some houses around here don't have any backyards, so we got lucky. But anyways, so when we first moved in, I had just a couple little potted plants along the one side. And then it grew to a little bit more of them. And then a few years ago, it grew to like a large back corner of the house. And then it grew to a large fenced in area of the backyard. And now it is, let's see, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 large planter boxes and then still like five small buckets. So it's yeah, I love gardening.
Can't beat it, right?
Right. What is your do you do flowers or vegetables, berries?
I have a herb patch, which I love. So that's great. I don't know, and other stuff. I think I really like sort of shrubs that are evergreen that then the birds can hide in and that sort of thing, because we've got quite a wild garden look going on. So I quite like sort of the wild shrubs that then, you can have sort of nature hiding out in. That seems pretty great.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah, I have a few little herbs and then strawberries are my jam. I have so
Yes.
many strawberry plants. Yeah, I specifically bought a brand new 8-foot long strawberry like bed for the strawberries, so they will just grow over the next few years and fill it all in. And
That sounds great.
yeah, my
Perfect.
grandson likes to come over and pick them all. So
Nice.
but I guess we should start really talking. Could talk about gardening for much longer. But
Definitely
let's go back. Let's take a stroll on back and start your your journey. I can talk. I really can. Start your journey with mental health. Let us know wherever makes the most sense for you.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, I think I know a lot of people sort of struggle with mental health, sort of various degrees and that sort of thing. And I think it's one of those things that I feel quite passionately that we should sort of normalize it as something we talk about, because I think it's one of those things that's very easily stigmatized, right?
Yeah.
And for me, I'm quite a sort of generally fairly positive person, very outgoing and that sort of thing. And so I find myself very easily just sort of hiding anything that I'm struggling with behind being sort of happy-go-lucky and positive and things like that, which,
Yeah.
is fine and all. But I mean, I think one of the things I've realized recently is there's a certain authenticity to being able to say, actually, I am struggling right now. Um,
Yeah.
and I know that I am, and I'm doing the right things to move forward with it and that sort of thing. And I think that's a really important thing to just kind of be authentic and honest about, really. And I think a lot of people maybe sort of struggle to do that. Certainly, certainly it's a very typical British thing to go, yes, I'm fine, when everyone asks you how you are, right?
It's not just a typical British thing,
I
it's
know.
also a typical Canadian thing, and from others that I've talked to, because we've had interviews all over, a typical American thing, a typical Australian thing, a typical where was she at? Spain thing.
Okay.
It's pretty worldwide. It really is, and you're right. It is an issue when we just kind of very quickly, oh, I'm fine. But are you? Are you really?
Yeah.
Okay. And so when did you realize that you were struggling? Like how young, how old were you?
I mean, I guess this is the thing, is like everyone has sort of difficult patches at different
Oh
points of their
yeah.
life, right? So I mean, I think one of the main ones for me is sadly my mum died when I was quite young,
Mm.
and that was sort of a really big thing for me at the time, obviously. And it's one of those things that I think anyone who's been through a bereavement will realize that it never quite goes away. Um,
Mhm.
it's always when you get to those sort of key points in your life that you then kind of are like, oh, I can't talk to them or tell them about this thing or whatever. And yeah, that was quite a big thing for me, particularly with writing, because my mum had always like really championed me being a writer and
Oh,
things
that's
like that.
awesome.
So yeah, I mean, it was really cool, and like, yeah, she was super great in terms of like encouraging creative passions and things like that. So yeah, when I got published, it was kind of like one of those things. I was like, no, I wish I could tell her, or she could read my book or whatever, right? But yeah, so I think when my mum died, that was probably like a first big step in terms of realizing that. But then I kind of just did that typical thing I suspect a lot of people do, which is like, well, I'm going to carry on because I got to do stuff and live and have a life and things like that. And then immediately
Right?
pause. Yeah.
Oh, there's such a I don't want to say fine line, but I can't think of a better term in this moment. So there's such a fine line between I know that I need to carry on and
Mm,
life and, my mom or whomever would want me to, but like I'm super sad and need to grieve and need to be upset in this moment.
yeah.
Right? So, and especially now I haven't lost a parent yet. But with my grandma, when my grandma died, 11 years ago now, I want to say like about
Sorry to
11.
hear that.
Um, and she was the same. She was very much like, yeah, go do what you want to do. But like in a much more gruff manner. Like she wasn't your sweet cookie bake. I had a nana who was a very sweet cookie baking kind of grandparent. This one was more like, gotta go to work, you gotta figure your stuff out. If you want to be self-employed, that's fine, but you gotta do what you gotta do. And so yeah, I know that she would be, I remember when she first, within the first maybe 2 years she had passed away, and I something happened. It was like a really good thing. And I want to be like, oh, grandma, guess what? I finally got, I think, because I was starting my personal training business. So I think it was like I hit whatever number of clients. So I was really excited at the time. I was like, oh, I can't. Oh, this is weird. And I didn't know how to feel. Like, I know I was sad, but at the same time, I was like, oh, I know that she would know from up in heaven and she's watching and all that stuff, but like, I can't tell her and be excited with her. Right?
Yeah. Which is quite hard. I'm sorry to hear
Right?
that. But
But
yeah.
at the same time, my grandma would also be like, well, suck it up, go to work, go do what you got to do. Right? So again, it's that fine line of, yeah, I'm sad I can't tell her, but I know what she would say. She would tell me to suck it up, go to work, do what I got to do. So maybe to honor her, I better go do that.
Yeah, which it's one of those things, isn't it? Because like I guess I had a similar thing, like whereas like I know that my mum would want me to keep going with stuff and all of this stuff, and then it's sort of, I think this is where it sort of becomes part of a mental health thing, doesn't it? Because then you put all this pressure on yourself to be the
Right.
person that you would think that they want you to be, and then you never really pause at that point, I think. And I mean, I think that for me, I often now say to people that ask me for sort of support and mental health advice and things like that, I often say, like, make sure you pause, because I went through a whole like chunk of lots of different like knock-on problems, basically, including sort of health anxiety, which I think we'll come back and talk a bit about later, and things like that. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think, like, I often say to people, like, make sure you've found some time to actually process it, because otherwise you'll have it come back to you like 5 years or 10 years later or whatever, and really like can crash on you at that point without
Yeah.
really having like spent the time with it that you need to, if that makes sense.
It totally does. And that is a theme I've heard from other people who have talked about loss. One person in particular, Doug Lawrence, he's been on the show a couple times, and he had lost his wife a couple years ago now. And that was a big thing, was, it can hit you out of the blue, and there's this really big grieving process. And he really advocated for grief support groups.
Yeah, I mean, I think talking about it is one of those things that obviously it sounds a bit sort of trite and almost a bit obvious to say it, right? But like, yeah, if we bottle it up, it's no good, really. And I'm not saying anything particularly revolutionary there, but
But you know
yeah,
what?
it's really
Sometimes
easy.
people have got to hear it more than one time before it really
Yeah.
sticks in there.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, I think, sort of, to bring this, I guess, full circle, because this is like ultimately a writing place, right? Is like, I think a lot of the things that I did to sort of work through a lot of this was write stuff.
Yep.
And that was like a helpful path for me to sort of then process a bunch of emotions that I'd realized that I just sort of put in a sort of waiting room almost. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, it sort of like opened up that box again. So then I could use writing to really sort of process what I was thinking about, if that makes sense. Have you ever done that?
I definitely have. When my brother died, that was kind of my go-to. I like to
Mm.
process not just through writing, but poetry writing specifically.
Yeah.
I
Hmm.
love poetry for it. And yeah, that was my go-to. Like almost that the same night that I found out that he had died, I think I wrote 3 or 4 different poems, like just that night, just to like get it out.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's it, is it's getting it out, isn't it? And it
Mhm.
also makes sense of your thoughts in some ways, doesn't it, too? Like,
Yeah.
you can have all of these ideas and things you're thinking about, and until you put it down, I think sometimes it's noise. It's like having a very busy brain at that point, isn't it?
Yes, a busy brain is a really good way to describe it, actually, especially at least for with my brother. I had to help my mom plan everything. So there was like all of these jobs, the to-do list
Mm.
of what had to get done. My mom was just totally useless. I understand why. So saying useless sounds like a really bad way of saying it, but she was just so distraught that she couldn't make these decisions. So I basically had to go put what you said, put these in a box. I'll deal with it later. I got to do this stuff now, and then I'll deal with, that'll come back. And you had mentioned that it kind of can come back out of the blue.
Yeah.
And so for those who have read my book, Goodbye Too Soon, you'll know this, and I've shared it a couple times. But when we were actually doing the burial for him, which was a month after the actual funeral because of COVID restrictions, I had a hissy fit. I started yelling at my brother and just berating him for what happened. And I started quietly, and then my godmother was like, "Hey, are you yelling at him?" And I was like, "Yeah, I am." And you know what? I think all of you would be yelling at him too right now. I know we're all sad, but we're all mad too. And I'm just like, because yeah, when you put it in a little box, it's like a can of soda. It gets shaken up, and it's gonna
Yeah.
just
Yeah. Pretty much.
yeah. Have you ever any of those moments?
Um, I'm not really a very typically angry person. Like, it takes a lot for me to get angry about things. Weirdly, I think one of those moments was, I went to see on my own, as it was, the Les Mis film when they did that.
Okay.
Which, because my mum really loved Les Mis, and so I really loved Les Mis because I grew up listening to it a lot. Um, and yeah, I just went on my own, and I was like, there was something about like the scene where I don't want to spoil it, but there's a very sort of key scene where they sing a very key song at the end, and that for me was very like a poignant moment where I was almost like, yeah, I can sort of move on at this point almost. This comes back
Okay.
to the music thing I was talking about earlier, where I
Right.
process things through writing and music. Yeah, so I think that was one of my moments really where I was sat in a cinema having a cry in the back row on my own.
You know what? Whatever works,
Yeah,
right? And
it's good.
that's the thing about this show, right? Everybody has different ways of processing, and that's what's great is we can share all of these different ways. So if it's music, if it's having a cry in the back of the movie theater, like,
Yeah.
whatever.
It's dark
Um,
in a movie theater, no one can see you cry.
right, as long as you're not like ugly crying and like being super loud,
Yeah.
I mean, then you might disturb people, but if it's just like a little, you're fine. You're totally fine.
Yeah.
As long as you feel better about it after. Okay. And so I don't want to say how have you moved on, but like how has it been like over time with dealing with it?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say right up front, like it never fully goes away, and like nor should you expect it to. I think this is one of the things that like I realized I probably did. I don't want to say wrong because that's almost like you can't be. I don't think you can do things wrong in this space. You
Right.
just exist with it, right? But I think one of the things that I tried to do early on was like push it all down and like expect that it was going to go away. But actually, like I've just come to accept that it's there, it's a thing, and then sort of you kind of then live with it at that point, and the anxiety spikes get a bit lower over time and that sort of thing. So yeah, I mean, I think one of the things, sort of to bring it back to like writing a bit again, like I was very in my first book, Testament of the Stars. Like, I wrote a character who I was a little bit like, yeah, this is kind of like a version of my mum, I think. And it was kind of I didn't want to be overt with it, and I've never really sort of talked a lot about this in interviews before because it's not been like super relevant, I think. But I kind of did it in a very fun way, like, and I really enjoyed doing it because I took the bits of her that I thought were like the most fun and the most sort of like
Aw.
forceful parts of her character, and I like wove them into this character, which is one of the protagonist's mothers. And yeah, just created this sort of fun, strong, like forceful force of nature kind of woman
Aw.
basically. And yeah, she this sort of yeah, I just wanted this very like female powerhouse, and I really enjoyed writing that. Yeah.
Oh, and that's so sweet. Like, it is such a nice way to kind of keep your mom there with you through the whole
Yeah.
thing, especially like you said, she was always cheering you on for it. So she's still cheering you on as a character. So that's really cool.
Yeah, it was nice, and it was quite funny actually because I hadn't told anyone I'd done that, and then my dad read the book and kind of I think recognized her in that character and said afterwards like that bit at the end reminded me of your mum, and I was like, well,
There's a reason for that.
yeah,
Oh, that's awesome.
yeah, it was cute.
So, what would be your biggest? I know we've talked about a few of them, but what was your biggest kind of coping strategy with dealing with the loss of your mom?
Um, I mean, I did to a large extent just sort of carry on and do things that I enjoyed, and I think that really helped. Because then I just sort of made sure I was having a bit of fun, really, and like, yeah, focusing on the bits of life that I enjoy. Um, yeah, I mean, I think the other thing is, and it's taken a long time to really sort of process it, I'd say. Like, I think I've only recently, like, in the last sort of few years, really got to the point where I'm like, yeah, I'm still like, obviously, it's still upsetting, but I'm not at a point anymore where I'm like cut up by it in the way that I was originally and that sort of thing.
Yeah,
So one of the things I think is like when other people are going through the same sort of situations, being able to be there for people. I'm a big one for support networks, and so providing like that support and that advice, and sort of just not trying to fix it for people because you can't, but
yeah,
being there to be someone that they can talk to that gets it is something that is really important, I think.
yeah.
So
Be the
that really helped.
listener.
Yeah, pretty much. I get a lot of energy from being a listener and supporting other people and things like that. So yeah, I think that's one way that I really just sort of grow from it, I think is probably the
Mhm.
best way I can explain it.
Definitely. And it's one of the big themes of this show too is being the listener, but also like um knowing that you're not the only person going through it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think more people just sort of sit with you with it is just quite powerful, isn't it?
Hmm. Definitely. So the other thing that you had mentioned on your screening questions was anxiety.
Mm.
So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, I think this is quite a complex one to break down. And again, it's not really something I talk about that much. And so it was really weird for me actually to write that screening form because I realized that I don't sort of tell people a lot about this stuff. And so doing this so publicly feels like a really weird way to do it. But yeah, in for a
But we're
penny.
here for it now.
Yeah, I'm live now, so it's too late.
Exactly.
So yeah, I mean, so I think there are two parts of it. Like when you have a parent who dies of cancer, I think there's always a very natural damn, I'm going to get cancer reaction that I lived with for like a whole
Yeah.
chunk of time. And, you know, obviously still think about from time to time, but that was sort of one part of it. Um, I think the other part is it as well, and this is more sort of coming to my second book, Dissonance of Birdsong. Um, while I was writing that, I'd just been diagnosed with chronic sinusitis. And that was quite a sort of thing for me because I didn't really, I'm not sure many people would, but I personally didn't identify as someone that has a chronic illness or anything like that. And I was like, but I'm fit and I'm healthy and I do all this exercise. So how am I this person? Meanwhile, having all of this impact of the sort of symptoms I was going through and that sort of thing. And I posted this on about this on X the other day because I was like wanted to see if anyone else had sort of had similar experiences. So yeah, I sort of there were two sort of prongs to it really. The second being the chronic sinusitis, which I think in terms of my day to day has had like a much bigger aspect of like impact on my life. And so yeah, a lot of the sort of themes in Dissonance of Birdsong are about like how to not overtly again, like just subtly woven in. It's kind of all about like how to be sort of fighting for yourself, fighting for what you need when you're going through this kind of
Oh,
thing.
I've
Um,
started. Mickey sent me that one,
oh,
and
right.
I have started reading it. I think just the first two chapters, and I'm not
Hmm.
far in at all. But now that I see you're saying those themes, I'm like, even at the beginning, there's that sense of
Yeah.
fighting for yourself.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah, and I mean that you'll see this as you go through it, or if you go through it, there's quite a drumbeat of that throughout that sort of changes as she goes through. But yeah, I think like the sense of sort of advocating for yourself and fighting for yourself is like two themes that I tried to sort of bring out quite strongly in that. And I think there's always
hmm
a sense that Ezeld, the protagonist we're talking about here, is kind of she's trying to define her own strength throughout, I think. I don't know, do you
yeah.
think that comes across?
I think so. Again, not very far into it, but yeah, I think so. I think I just finished the first two chapters. So I think there is the way that she is expressing her need to go and talk to the leader. I don't want to give anything away. So her expressing the need to go talk to the leader, there's definitely that sense of I need
Mm.
to do this for myself, for others. I need to be the one to go and do this.
Yeah. And yeah, it's yeah, I mean I'm interested to hear you say that because yeah, it is kind of like that's the sort of advocacy that I guess is kind of relevant here, isn't it? But
Exactly.
yeah.
Like 100% it is. Um, so there was something else that popped into my head and then it popped out. I hate when that happens.
All the time. Busy
Yeah,
brains, right?
exactly. But so how do you I hate saying manage it too. I gotta find some better language to use. I'm slowly learning it, but how do you find is best to manage your anxiety? Oh, I remember. Wait, before you answer that question, I remember what it is. So, see, it pops in, pops out. You had mentioned when you lose somebody to cancer, and then there's always that thought, oh, am I going to get it? So, it's the same when you've had cancer. So, I had cancer 6 or 7 years ago now.
I'm sorry to
Something
hear
like
that.
that.
Sorry to hear that.
I'm all better now. They just took it out. But there is that sense now of, is it ever coming back? Like whenever there's like a weird ache or pain or something, it's this. And I never had considered before that I have this anxiety, but I have this medical anxiety now around, is it back? Because there's always the chance that it can come back, right?
Yeah.
And especially around the time when I go back for the routine screening, there's always that sense of, oh my gosh, is it back? Until you get the all good. So I think it's a very common theme with people, because even others that I've talked to for mammogram, because she had breast cancer before. And so it was totally routine. It has been quite a few years ago still. But there was that sense of, I need to hear the okay before I can breathe.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think because I sort of did quite a lot of work to get to a point where I could just sit with the anxiety and not have it like mess up my day every time I got worried about something.
Right. Yeah.
And one weird thing was like, because I spoke to quite a few people about this, including like professionally as well.
Yep.
And one thing that someone said to me was, what's the worst that could happen? And I would say, well, I get cancer. And they're like, okay, what's the worst that could happen? And the point that they were making was, can you control it? And the answer was no, I can only control how I respond to it.
Yes.
And if I respond to it by worrying, then obviously it makes it worse and in your head and things like that. But if I respond to it by going, I can't control it, so I'm just going to do what I can control, which is, eating healthily and looking out for if it becomes a problem and all of the other things that you read about that is like good. But broadly, it was like, focus on what you can control. And that kind of just helped me to kind of go, look, can't control that, put it in a box and it's over there because I can't control it, and I'll focus on the bits that I can. And that really helped. I don't know if that sounds like it helped you as well.
Yeah, I definitely try, but in the moment it can be can be hard. But that is such a good piece of wisdom. I hate saying advice because nobody ever wants advice, but it's a good piece of wisdom. I used to say that to my youngest when he was little. So he used to get in trouble at school a whole bunch for retaliation. He never started anything, but he also didn't have the ability to process it quickly enough to respond in a healthier way.
Yeah.
So this, for those who have watched the show a bunch, I'm talking about my kid with autism. And so he would get in trouble because somebody at the school would say something to him and he would physically react because, again, he didn't have the capacity to quickly come back with something snappy or to just be like, I don't care your opinion and walk away. Right. And I'm talking kindergarten, grade 1, grade 2, like I'm talking little. And I used to always tell him, try to explain to him what you just said. You can't control other people. So things you can't control that. You can only control how you react. What are the things you can control? And it's taken a lot of time. He's 17 now, so he is better at it. Still a struggle. But that's exactly what you said. And I had a little flashback to that moment, to all those moments. I say, well, I don't care what they did. I can't control them. You can't control them. You can only control yourself.
Yeah, and once you start thinking in that way, I think it applies to so many different things through life, doesn't it? Like how you respond to stuff at work or anything like that. It's it just makes life kind of almost easier to manage for me anyway.
I think actually, yeah, I think it does. At my day job, whenever we're answering phones and it's somebody who's complaining, it's a nice thing to think, oh, I can't control how you're feeling right now. I can just control not letting it bug me. Yeah. I don't need to let your bad mood ruin my good mood.
Yeah, pretty much. And that's just I think it inherently sort of is making you sort of, or for me anyway, makes me feel sort of strong in the situation, because then I can just control that. I'm just going to smile and go, all right, cool, we move on
Right.
now.
Have the day you deserve.
Yeah.
So we are slowly coming closer to the end. So before we get into what you've written, which you've already a little bit talked about, but we'll talk about it a little bit more. What is your best piece of wisdom for somebody who is going through, maybe they're they've been dealing with anxiety, maybe they don't know it was anxiety, they're realizing it's anxiety. What's your best piece of wisdom for them right now?
I think I'd say don't try and squash it. It's legitimate to have it. And I think a lot of us have it at sort of different levels throughout life and things like that, and that's totally okay. Um, I think finding someone independent, possibly professional, if you've lucky enough to have that situation, just to talk it through and have that independent space, I think is really important. Is sort of a really practical way of dealing with it. I think also, um, take yourself out of the situation. And I think I say that because, well, I'll caveat that slightly. I think you should not do this alone. I think it always is worth having somewhere safe and professional to have a conversation if you need it, and that sort of thing. Very much up to you if that's something you feel you need. But I think in tandem with that, taking yourself out of the situation and thinking, why did that make me anxious? Is it something that I need to revisit? If it's something I need to revisit, how do I go back into that situation in a way that I can control how I'm responding or feeling about it?
That's
Both of those things.
that's a really, really wise piece there. That it's been mentioned, but I don't think it's been mentioned enough on the show, is thinking about it in the moment. Whew, good
Mhm.
luck, especially when you're feeling anxious and everything, right? Good luck. But I like that looking back later, and especially if you are with a professional. I could not do this by myself. I had to do it with my therapist, because when I would do it to myself, I would just make it even worse in my head.
It's easily done.
Right. So, but that's why the professionals are there. And yeah, it was amazing how she would kind of go, okay, and what do you
Yeah.
mean? Okay, and well, are you okay now in this moment? Yeah. So, did it have a lasting effect on you? No. Right. And just the way she would word things was like, huh. Like it's so simple. Why didn't I see that?
Yeah.
They just have that way of bringing out this completely different outlook, and you're like, huh,
Yeah.
well,
And sometimes you need someone else that's just outside to help you think about it in that different way, right? Whether
exactly. Like,
that's, yeah,
yeah, I couldn't.
whether
I
that's
made
friend.
it much worse when I would think about it myself, because you're. I feel like when you're thinking about it yourself, for me, anyways, is I'm playing the worst parts of the situation.
Yeah.
I'm not playing any of the other things. I'm not playing the, well, I didn't have control over that situation anyways. No, I'm playing the, well, why didn't I fix this? And why didn't I do that? And well, I
Yeah.
couldn't. So I didn't. But so having that outside person, yeah, that's huge.
hmm And I think after a while, you then learn how to do that for yourself as well. And
Yeah.
that's not to say that, that having an external person isn't always helpful. I think it is. But after a while, I think you can get to a point where you're then like, okay, what did that person say to me? Okay, I'm going to apply that here. And then
Right.
it almost becomes second nature to kind of go, yeah, I couldn't
Exactly.
control that.
It's a skill that you have
Yeah.
learned and you
Yeah.
can use. Exactly, which I definitely do. Um, and the nice thing about professionals is you can go to them, you learn a skill, use it for a while. If maybe you need a little tune up or a different situation occurs, you can go back, right? Like it's not like something you have to do forever and ever and ever.
Yeah.
if you can afford to, by all means, go ahead. Um, but it is something that is there to teach you, and then you can apply it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's one of the things. I mean, you talked about it there as it being a sort of skill that you learn. I think that's a really valuable way of thinking about it, right? Because I think a lot of people talk about it as like, I've got anxiety and it's something that's wrong. And yeah, there's something that's wrong that's causing that. But it, like we all have different levels of anxiety at points in our life, right? And it's all about how you learn to like live with it. And like anything else in life, it's just a skill that you sort of get used to, right? um
Exactly.
yeah. For me anyway, I don't want to apply this to everybody because I think, as I say, there's different degrees. And
Right, definitely.
yeah.
But it's all very helpful, I think. So let's talk about what you've written a little bit more. So we know this is I did say it because clearly I can't get the words out.
Dissonance of birdsong. I was worried I wasn't going to be able to say it then, and then it would be really bad. It's like the author not being able to say her own book.
Oh, sometimes your tongue just a little. Um. So and sorry, was that your second book you said?
Yeah, so that's my second book. So I've written two books and a bunch of short stories, but two books. So both are sort of folklore fantasy type tales. I guess I'll talk about Dissonance, given that I've started. So Dissonance is coming out in August, and it's a folkloric fantasy. It's set in Bronze Age Britain, um, specifically in Cornwall, which is sort of a very rugged coastal part of the country. And that was really important for the setting that I wanted to convey, because it's all about like the sea and the birds and nature. And
Yes.
so being amid those sort of rough storm beaten lands seemed really important. And basically it's the story about a very small settlement that have to breathe in this mist that's in the lungs of these birds to survive the harsh climates, and they use the mist from the birds to survive in various different ways, which I won't spoil because it becomes quite sort of important to the story. But the mist is running out and they don't really know why. And so Ezeld, the protagonist, when her mist starts to run out, she realizes she needs to do something or face the consequences of it for her and her sister. So really it's a story about fighting to try and get that mist back or understand why. And
Mhm.
I'd say there's elements of mystery to it as well, because there's quite a lot of layers, I think, to the story as it evolves. um and yeah, it's about a lot of it's about sort of what will you do to try and survive and save the ones you care about and that sort of thing. So yeah, and I really loved writing it. There's a lot of different angles to it, I'd say. Like there's obviously the chronic illness angle, which is there, but I wouldn't say like overtly there, but it undeniably is a theme. There's also quite a lot to do with sort of like nature and folklore and our relationship with nature and that sort of thing.
Mhm.
And then a good old folkloric mystery, which we all like, right?
I love it. I love a good mystery. So is the is this whole breathing mist and thing come from a specific folklore? Like
So I made that up.
okay.
The breathing in of the mist, I made that up, but largely based on. I did take it from some folklore stuff. So there's this whole idea of the other world, which is a sort of Celtic idea of there being this mystical other land, and that is shrouded in mist in a lot of folklore. And you typically a lot of the stories you can either travel through a sea cave to get there, or you can travel through mist at sea to get there, and that sort of thing.
Okay.
So I kind of took that idea and then played with a concept of, right, well, what if I sort of try and move the mist onto land and people are using it? How are they using it? How is it getting onto the land and that sort of thing? And so I thought the birds that are flying through the mist or flying
Okay.
around the mist are inhaling it and taking it to the land. And that's how I got there, if that makes sense.
It does. And it kind of gives me a nice like background as I
Mm.
continue to read the book.
Yeah, definitely. It's one of those things that there's so much research and things that goes into books that then behind the
Right.
books that then don't actually always end up in the books. So it's quite nice
Exactly.
context.
Yes. Yes. And so you said it comes out in August, right?
Mhm.
And where will people be able to get it?
So in all places that you can buy books generally, I think. So it'll definitely be on Amazon. I think it's on Barnes and Noble as well. And a few other sort of places here and there. Sometimes it does end up in bookshops, but I think that very much depends on the sort of placing of lists and some
Yeah.
kind of wizardry about how books get listed in shops that I don't understand.
Don't ask me, me neither. um, Excellent. And for those listening, I mean, be sure to follow on What I'm Reading podcast or my blog, because the book review for it will be coming out in a week or two, probably ish.
Sounds good. I look forward to seeing that. They say don't read reviews, but I still haven't learned that task yet.
I always do too. I always read the reviews, and I have been lucky so far that they've all been nice. Even the ones that maybe don't care for the book have been nice.
Mm,
Like,
that's good.
right, because that's the thing, and that's whenever I'm writing a book review, even if I'm like, wow, to me this book was just what. Not
Mm,
saying that about your book, I haven't finished it yet. But I've read some, I'm like, oh my gosh, how am I gonna put a nice spin on this? Because just because
mhm.
I didn't like it doesn't mean there's not an audience for it.
Yeah.
I just maybe wasn't that audience. Now, if your book has very glaring grammatical or like glaring mistakes, or all of a sudden the main character went from being named Bob to being named Billy or something without a reason, then I'm like, I don't
Mm,
know how to be nice. Um, but for the most part, I think there's an audience for all books, and
yeah.
if you don't like it, you can put your 2 cents in. By all means, definitely put your 2 cents in, but you don't have to be mean about it. That's all.
Yeah, I mean it's highly subjective, isn't it? As with all things art based. But yeah, I think also there's something in that about, for me anyway, I quite like reading them because if there are pointers, which I have
Right?
received some reviews like that, I'm thinking, well, okay, that's great because I've only written 2 books and
Yeah,
now I can do it better for the next one.
exactly. Right. And that's
Yeah,
why I say be nice about it. You can for sure criticize, just be constructive. Will you do
yeah,
so?
absolutely.
Right.
Yeah, for sure.
So we're asking. We're not saying you have to always love our books. Just don't be mean about it.
Yeah, absolutely that.
um,
Um,
and where are people gonna follow you?
So I am on X, or X Twitter, um, and also on Facebook and Instagram. I think we can probably put the links in
They'll
the
be
sort of
there in the
chat
description.
details and description. Yes, those are the places I'm on. I also have a website, and on there is a wonderful little page about the background of Dissonance of Birdsong, which has a bunch of the folk songs in it and why I put it there and why I used them and that sort of thing.
Oh,
And you
cool.
can also check out the maps for both Dissonance and Testament of the Stars on there, which, yeah, I would recommend doing. And there's a bunch of short stories and stuff that I've written on there too. So,
Cool.
yeah, it's exciting.
Very nice. Well, thank you so much for coming on and sharing with us.
No worries. It's been lovely and really nice to chat to you.
All right, bye.
Bye.
As always, thank you so much for the amazing guests that we have on the show. Be sure to check out their links down in the description below. If you want to support the channel, go ahead and check out our merch store. We've got some very cool things on there. That's my favorite. Sorry, I'm busy ending the stigma. But there's some other very cool designs. 10% of the proceeds always goes back to the Canadian Mental Health Association. Be sure to follow us on Facebook at RB Media because we have some great new shows coming up and you never want to miss any of those episodes. And remember, the only way to end the stigma of mental health is to speak openly and honestly. Bye.